The evening shift had just begun, and the hospital already felt tired. The lights in the emergency room were bright, but the air felt heavy. Machines beeped in uneven rhythms. Nurses moved quickly between beds. Doctors spoke in short, sharp sentences. Families waited along the walls, holding on to hope with quiet prayers and restless hands. She stood near the nurse's station, adjusting her badge for the third time in 10 minutes. It still felt strange seeing her name printed under the word, registered nurse. Only 3 weeks ago, she had been a student trying to prove herself. Now she was officially part of the team. Some people welcomed her kindly. Others were polite, but distant. A few made small comments she pretended not to hear. She's new. Let's not give her anything too serious. She looks too calm for this place. She didn't argue. She didn't try to defend herself. She simply listened and kept learning. She had worked too hard to be here. Long nights studying. Double shifts during training. Weekends spent practicing procedures while her friends rested. She didn't come this far to complain. Still, being the rookie meant something. It meant she was watched closely. It meant mistakes would not be forgiven easily. It meant she had to prove herself every single shift. At 7:42 p.m., the first ambulance siren cut through the air outside. No one thought much of it. Ambulances arrived all the time. Then another siren followed, and another. Within minutes, the emergency room doors swung open again and again. Paramedics rushed in with stretchers. Their voices were louder than usual. Multi-vehicle collision. Highway 17. Multiple critical injuries. Everything changed at once. The waiting room cleared as staff prepared for trauma cases. Extra beds were rolled in. Supplies were opened and tossed onto metal trays. The calm rhythm of the ER disappeared. A senior nurse turned toward her. Stay close. Don't do anything without checking first. She nodded. The first patient came in unconscious. Blood stained his shirt. A doctor immediately began giving orders. She stepped forward to help, her hands steady as she attached monitors. Heart rate unstable. Blood pressure dropping. The doctor asked for medication. She passed it without hesitation. The second stretcher rolled in before the first one was even stabilized. A young woman, barely breathing. A third patient followed, a child crying confusion. The room grew louder. For a moment, she felt the eyes on her. The silent question, can she handle this? She took one slow breath. Then she moved. The child's oxygen level was falling fast. Someone shouted for a respiratory therapist, but they were tied up with another case. She didn't wait. She adjusted the mask carefully and repositioned the child's head the way she had practiced hundreds of times. Stay with me, she whispered softly. The numbers on the monitor began to climb. Across the room, a doctor struggled to find a pulse on another patient. She noticed something others hadn't. A small detail on the medical bracelet. Allergy, she said quickly, pointing. The medication about to be given was switched immediately. Minutes mattered. In emergencies, minutes feel like seconds. A fourth patient was wheeled in, chest pain, weak pulse. She checked the chart, listened carefully, and felt something wasn't right. The symptoms didn't match the obvious injury. She spoke up. I think we should run another scan. There was hesitation. She was new. Who was she to question? But the doctor saw the seriousness in her eyes and agreed. The scan revealed internal bleeding that had not been visible at first glance. Surgery was prepared immediately. If they had waited longer, it might have been too late. The hours blurred together. Sweat gathered at her hairline, but her hands never shook. When one patient went into cardiac arrest, she didn't freeze. She stepped in and began chest compressions while others prepared equipment. Her rhythm was steady, focused, almost practiced beyond her years. Clear. The shock was delivered. The heart monitor flatlined for one long second. Then it beeped again. A small sound. But in that room, it meant everything. Someone behind her whispered, "Good job." She didn't turn around. She was already moving to the next bed. Outside the trauma area, families waited without knowing details. A mother clutched her phone with shaking hands. An older man paced in circles. A teenage boy stared at the floor as if afraid to look up. She stepped out briefly to update one family. "He's stable," she said gently. We're doing everything we can." The mother burst into tears and hugged her before she could react. For a second, the weight of it hit her. These weren't just patients. They were someone's entire world. Back inside, another complication appeared. A patient's breathing became shallow. She adjusted medication levels carefully, watching the monitor closely. She noticed the smallest change before it became dangerous. The doctor looked at her with new respect. "Nice catch." She nodded once and continued working. There was no time to celebrate. At some point, she realized she hadn't checked the clock in over an hour. It didn't matter. Time to move normally during chaos. It stretched and folded into itself. Every decision had weight. Every second carried risk. Yet she moved as if she had been in storms before. Not reckless. Not emotional. Just focused. When the final critical patient was stabilized, the room slowly began to quiet. The loudest sounds faded into softer beeps and tired breathing. Someone finally looked at the clock. 2 hours. 7 critical patients. All alive. The staff exchanged looks of disbelief. One of the senior doctors leaned against the counter and exhaled deeply. That could have gone very differently. Another nurse glanced toward her. She was washing her hands calmly, as if it had been an ordinary shift. But it hadn't. Not even close. The charge nurse approached her slowly. "You handled yourself well tonight." "Thank you," she replied quietly. "You didn't panic." She paused for just a second. "I tried not to." It was a simple answer, but something about it felt deeper. As stretchers were moved to other departments and paperwork began, the mood in the room changed. There was relief, yes, but also curiosity. How did she know what to do so quickly? Why did she seem so comfortable in chaos? Most new nurses struggle during their first major emergency. Some freeze. Some hesitate. It's normal, but she hadn't. Later that night, when things finally slowed down, she stepped outside the hospital for fresh air. The night was cool and quiet, almost too peaceful compared to what had just happened inside. She sat on a bench and stared at the parking lot lights. For the first time in hours, her shoulders relaxed. Her phone buzzed in her pocket. Messages from coworkers praising her performance. One called her a hero. She didn't feel like one. She felt tired and thoughtful. She closed her eyes for a moment, and a memory flashed across her mind. Not from nursing school, not from training, but from somewhere else. Somewhere louder, darker. She opened her eyes quickly and pushed the thought away. That was the past. Tonight was about the people inside those hospital walls. 7 families who would not receive terrible phone calls. 7 lives still breathing. After a few minutes, she stood up and walked back inside. The hospital corridor felt different now. Not because of praise. Not because of attention. But because something had shifted. The whispers about her being too calm were gone. In their place was quiet respect. What no one knew was that this night was only the beginning. By morning, news of the highway crash would spread. By afternoon, someone would start asking deeper questions. And before the week ended, unexpected visitors would walk through those same hospital doors, not because of the accident itself, but because of her. But for now, she returned to her station, picked up a chart, and prepared for the next patient. Because in her mind, the job wasn't about proving anything. It was about being ready when the moment came. And when the moment came tonight, she had been ready. By morning, the hospital felt different. News of the highway crash had spread across the city. Reporters stood outside the entrance. Camera crews waited near the parking lot. Social media posts praised the emergency team for saving multiple lives in a single night. Inside the hospital, staff members moved through their shifts with tired eyes but proud hearts. 7 patients were stable. Some were already awake. Families who walked in shaking were now whispering words of thanks instead of prayers of fear. Her name began circulating quietly among the staff. She was everywhere last night. She caught things even seniors missed. For a new nurse, that was unbelievable. She tried to avoid the attention. She focused on charting updates and checking vitals. Compliments made her uncomfortable. She preferred action over praise. But something else was happening. In the administrative office, The hospital director and two senior physicians reviewed security footage from the emergency room. It was standard procedure after any major trauma event. They analyzed response times and decisions to improve future protocols. As they watched, one detail stood out. Her movements. She didn't look lost. She didn't hesitate. When equipment failed briefly in one room, she adjusted without visible stress. When instructions overlapped, she filtered them calmly. Her body language did not match someone in her third week on the job. One of the senior doctors leaned forward. Pause it there. The screen froze on the moment she redirected treatment because of the allergy alert. How did she spot that so quickly? No one answered. Her file was pulled from the system. Nursing school with strong grades. Clinical evaluations describe her as focused and quiet. No disciplinary issues. No unusual background. On paper, she was impressive but ordinary. Yet what they saw on screen did not feel ordinary. Later that afternoon, she was called into a small office. Her heart skipped for a second. Being called into administration rarely meant something casual. The director smiled politely. "We just wanted to say you did excellent work last night." She thanked him softly. "Where did you learn to handle pressure like that?" One physician asked gently. She hesitated. "Training," she said. They waited for more. She gave none. It wasn't that she was hiding anything. It was just that some experiences didn't fit neatly into conversation. The meeting ended without issue. She returned to her shift. But the questions didn't stop there. By evening, local news stations had begun requesting interviews. The hospital's public relations team wanted to highlight the staff's heroism. A short ceremony was being discussed. Her co-workers encouraged her to participate. "You deserve recognition. You save lives." She smiled politely but avoided committing. That night, just before her shift ended, two men in dark suits walked to the main entrance. They were not reporters. They were not patients. Their posture alone changed the atmosphere at the front desk. They introduced themselves quietly and showed official identification from the Federal Bureau of Investigation. The receptionist's smile faded into confusion. Within minutes, administration was notified. The agents did not raise their voices. They did not create a scene. They simply asked to speak with the rookie nurse in private. Word spread quickly. Why would federal agents want to talk to her? Is something wrong? Speculation moved faster than facts. Some staff members assumed it was about the accident. Maybe one of the victims was connected to an ongoing case. Maybe paperwork had triggered something unusual. Others worried quietly. Had the hospital missed something in her background check? Was there something they didn't know? She was called from the trauma ward and told visitors were asking for her. When she saw the agents waiting near the administrative hallway, her face did not change. If anything, she looked prepared. The director walked beside her, clearly tense. "Do you know why they're here?" he whispered. She shook her head gently. "No." Inside a small conference room, the door closed softly behind them. The agents placed a thin folder on the table. One of them spoke first. "You're not in trouble." The director exhaled in relief. "We just need clarification regarding something in our system," the agent continued. She listened quietly. "Your name was flagged after a report from this hospital was filed this morning." Her eyebrows lifted slightly. "Flagged?" "Yes. It's likely routine, but we have to confirm." The director looked confused. "Flagged for what exactly?" The agent opened the folder. Inside were documents dated several years earlier. Photos from an overseas location, a relief camp, temporary medical tents. Her younger face in one of the pictures. The director turned toward her slowly. "You never mentioned this," he said. She remained calm. "It was a long time ago." The agents explained carefully. Years earlier, during a volunteer medical trip abroad, there had been a serious security incident. It had made internal headlines but never became a major public story. Some volunteers were caught in a dangerous situation when local unrest escalated unexpectedly. Medical teams were isolated for hours before authorities resolved the crisis. Several people were injured during the chaos. Supplies ran low. Communication was limited. According to the file, she had been one of the youngest volunteers there. And during that time, she had assisted in emergency care under extreme pressure, improvising treatment, keeping patients stable, helping coordinate with responders once communication was restored. The agents looked at her closely. Your performance report from last night matched behavioral notes from that incident. Our system automatically cross-referenced it. The director blinked. You're saying she's in some database because she helped people? In simple terms, yes, the agent replied. Silence filled the room. She stared at the photo for a moment. She remembered the heat of that place, the sound of distant shouting, the fear in patients' eyes, the feeling of having no proper equipment and still needing to act. You were barely out of school back then, the director said softly. She nodded. Why didn't you tell anyone? She gave a small shrug. It wasn't something I thought mattered here, but it did matter. It explained everything. The calmness, the precision, the steady breathing during chaos. The agents clarified that she had done nothing wrong. In fact, her actions in the past had been noted positively. The system flag was simply procedural because her name appeared in an archived federal report tied to that overseas event. They needed confirmation of her current employment and identity. After verifying basic details, they closed a folder. We appreciate your cooperation, one agent said. Before leaving, he added quietly, not everyone handles situations like that the way you did, both then and now. She didn't respond with pride. She simply nodded. When the door opened and they stepped back into the hallway, curious eyes followed. The agents exited without drama, but the air inside the hospital had shifted again. The director asked her to remain for a moment. You understand why this surprised us, he said gently. I do. You've been through more than most people here. She looked down at her hands. Everyone has something, she replied. Later that evening, whispers filled the staff lounge. Some were amazed. Some were embarrassed for doubting her. One nurse admitted quietly, I thought she was just lucky last night. Another shook her head. That wasn't luck. She avoided the lounge entirely. Instead, she checked on each of the 7 patients one more time before going home. The child was awake and watching cartoons. The man who had been unconscious squeezed her hand weakly and whispered thank you. The woman who had needed surgery was stable and sleeping peacefully. Seeing them alive mattered more than any conversation about her past. As she stepped out of the hospital into the cool night air, she felt the weight of old memories pressing gently against her thoughts. She had hoped that chapter of her life would remain quiet, not because she was ashamed, but because she preferred being known for the present. Now, that past had quietly followed her into this new beginning. She looked back at the hospital building glowing under streetlights. Tomorrow, the questions would grow louder. The media would want details. The hospital board would want explanations. And her co-workers would look at her differently. But inside, she felt the same as always. Focused, grounded, ready for whatever came next. The morning after the federal agents visited was quiet in comparison to the previous night. But the tension in the hospital had grown. Staff whispered in hallways. Conversations paused when she entered a room. Even those who had praised her heroism the night before now looked at her with curiosity and uncertainty. Her calm, almost stoic demeanor had shifted from admirable to mysterious. She focused on her work, checking patient vitals and reviewing charts. Her hands moved with practiced precision, but her mind kept replaying the previous day. The images from the overseas relief camp, the chaos, the fear, and the responsibility she had carried all came back. It was a part of her story she rarely spoke about. Her supervisor approached her cautiously. There are questions being raised about your past, she said softly. I expected that, she replied. They want details. How you got this experience, why it wasn't listed in your resume, things like that. She nodded without speaking. There wasn't much to explain without going into a story that had been her private struggle, one that she didn't think anyone here needed to know. Word reached her that an investigator from the FBI was scheduled to return. He wanted a formal interview, not an interrogation, just to clarify the details. Staff wondered why a new nurse with just 3 weeks on the job would suddenly attract federal attention. Rumors began to circulate, some leaning toward suspicion, others toward admiration. Her first patient of the morning was a middle-aged man recovering from surgery after the accident. He smiled weakly when he saw her. "You're the one they keep talking about," he said. She smiled back lightly. "I just did what I could." 7 people. "All alive because of you," he said. She nodded. "I was part of the team." But internally, she knew that night had tested her in ways the others hadn't seen. Each split-second decision had been critical. Each moment could have ended in tragedy. She wasn't naive enough to think luck had anything to do with it. By mid-morning, the hospital conference room was prepared. She walked in alone, facing 2 agents who greeted her politely. They didn't carry an air of authority, meant to intimidate. Instead, they were methodical, professional, and calm. Their presence was serious but not threatening. "Thank you for meeting with us again," one began. "We just need to verify details regarding an overseas incident from several years ago." She nodded. "I understand." They asked questions about the volunteer trip, how she had managed supplies, what procedures she had performed, how she had assisted in emergencies. Her answers were concise and factual. She avoided dramatizing events or adding unnecessary emotion. She simply told the truth, as she remembered it. At one point, one agent paused. "You were very young. Most people in that situation would have panicked." She shrugged lightly. There wasn't time to panic. Someone had to act. Another question followed. "Why didn't you include this experience in your employment records?" "I didn't think it was relevant to my application," she said. "I want to be judged on my current skills and qualifications, not the emergencies I faced years ago." The agents exchanged glances and one nodded. "Understood. We just needed confirmation. Your performance last night matched patterns we've seen from people trained under extreme pressure. It's remarkable for someone at your level." She said nothing, only listened. After the interview, they thanked her and left. The hospital returned to its regular rhythm, but the atmosphere had shifted again. People whispered less about suspicion and more about respect, though there was still a sense of awe and disbelief. She returned to her patients. But the morning shift brought new challenges. A patient in the ICU developed a sudden fever. Another showed signs of internal stress that were subtle but dangerous. She noticed details others had missed and alerted the attending doctor, preventing further complications. Every patient she touched received careful attention. Each decision mattered. By lunchtime, the stories from the previous night had reached the local media. Hospital administrators had prepared press releases highlighting the heroism of the team. Staff asked if she would participate in interviews. She declined politely, stating she preferred her work to speak for itself. The reporters respected her wishes, but continued to call the hospital, seeking interviews and background information. The afternoon was busy. A new patient arrived with multiple injuries from a different accident. Again, she stepped in without hesitation, following protocols efficiently and calmly. The nurses and doctors around her watched, noting that her composure was consistent, not situational. She handled chaos as if it were ordinary, but every action was precise, calculated, and effective. Later, she found a quiet corner to take a short break. She closed her eyes and leaned back. The fatigue was heavy, but her mind kept replaying the moments of last night. The adrenaline, the responsibility, the urgency. Saving 7 lives in 2 hours was extraordinary, but she also remembered the fear in patients' eyes, the tension in doctors' voices, and the pressure to get everything exactly right. She felt the weight of responsibility more than pride. Her thoughts were interrupted when a senior nurse approached. "I'm sorry if this is personal, but I've heard about your overseas work. Were you always that calm under pressure?" She paused. "I had to be," she said. "It was survival, and it was responsibility. You focus on what you can control and let the rest go." The nurse nodded slowly. "I think that's why you handled last night so well. It's not luck or skill alone. It's experience." She gave a faint smile and returned to her tasks. The recognition was welcome, but she didn't seek validation. Her focus remained on patients, charts, and protocols. By evening, the hospital was quiet again. Families visited patients, bringing words of gratitude, small gifts, and letters. She moved through each room silently, ensuring everything was stable. Patients responded to her presence with calm and reassurance, though none fully understood the depth of her experience. Before leaving for the night, She returned to the nurse's station. Her hands were tired, her feet ached, but her mind was clear. She glanced at the security footage monitors, seeing herself and others from last night. The images reminded her of responsibility, focus, and fragility of life. As she left the hospital, the sky was dark but peaceful. The city lights glimmered, reflecting in puddles from a light rain. She walked slowly, reflecting on the whirlwind of events. Federal agents, media attention, patient gratitude, and the unending responsibility of her role all weighed on her. But she carried it quietly. She knew the next days would be filled with questions, recognition, and curiosity from colleagues. But she also knew her purpose remained the same, to be ready, to act, and to focus on the people who depended on her. Her past had resurfaced unexpectedly, but she faced it with quiet strength. She had acted then, she had acted now, and she would continue to act whenever life demanded. The hospital doors closed behind her. The night was calm, but inside, she carried the knowledge that challenges and scrutiny would return. She was prepared to face them, as always, with focus, skill, and a steady heart. By the fourth day, the hospital atmosphere had shifted from curiosity to something heavier. Staff members who had only seen her as the quiet rookie now regarded her with a mixture of admiration and cautious awe. Questions about her past circulated more freely. Some wondered why she hadn't disclosed her overseas experience. Others assumed there was a story the hospital wasn't being told. Despite the whispers, she continued her routine as usual, checking charts, monitoring patients, and assisting doctors. She remained calm, quiet, and efficient. In the early morning, the hospital director requested a private meeting. The news media had been persistent, and the hospital's legal team wanted assurances that there were no issues with her background. She arrived promptly, prepared to answer questions without dramatics. She had faced scrutiny before, and she could handle it again. The director and two senior physicians sat across from her, looking slightly uneasy. They spoke politely but directly. "We've reviewed the information provided by the FBI." The director began. "We understand that your performance last night triggered a review due to your previous experience overseas." She nodded. "Yes, I understand." "One question remains," a senior physician added. "Why was this experience not mentioned in your records? It seems unusual, especially given the circumstances." She took a deep breath, choosing her words carefully. "I didn't believe it was relevant. That experience was intense, yes, but it was years ago. I wanted to be evaluated on my skills here, not my history." The director leaned back, processing her words. "I see. It's not common, but it does explain your composure during the emergency." The meeting continued, with the staff seeking reassurance that she had no hidden issues, criminal or otherwise. She confirmed that she was in good standing, and that nothing in her past would affect her current work. By the end of the discussion, the staff left with new understanding. She had done extraordinary work before, and that had shaped the skills they had witnessed recently. Later that day, she returned to her patients. Each step through the hospital corridors reminded her of the lives she had touched, both recently and in the past. Families came to her with gratitude, and some patients smiled when she walked in. She responded with simple kindness, never lingering for praise. It was her nature to act, not to seek attention. Meanwhile, news crews had contacted the hospital again. The media wanted a statement, photographs, interviews. Administrators debated whether she should participate. She declined politely, emphasizing that the hospital team had acted together and that she did not need recognition. The staff supported her wishes, though some reporters seemed insistent. Her refusal added an air of mystery to her story, which only increased public interest. During the afternoon, a new case arrived, a man in severe pain, suspected of internal injuries. The attending physician was distracted by another patient. Without hesitation, she assessed the man, noting subtle signs others had missed. Her observations led to a quick intervention that likely prevented a serious complication. Colleagues watched quietly, taking note of her efficiency and calm demeanor. The day's events reminded them that her actions were not a fluke. They were the result of experience and focus. As the day turned into evening, the hospital began to quiet down. Families visited their recovering loved ones, expressing gratitude through words, small gifts, and gestures of relief. She moved through each room, offering reassurance and care. Patients responded positively, though few fully understood the depth of her capabilities. She felt satisfaction in knowing that her work had immediate, tangible impact. Later, she was called to meet again with a hospital administrator and one of the federal agents. This time, the purpose was not to question but to confirm her employment and ensure that the hospital was aware of her past experiences for future reference. The agent explained that her overseas work had been previously classified, but that her recent actions had brought it to attention due to matching patterns of high-pressure performance. Everything she had done previously was commendable, and there were no issues or concerns. The conversation reinforced a growing understanding among hospital leadership. Her calm, precise decision-making during the emergency was not luck. It was a skill shaped by real, intense experiences. Her past had prepared her in ways formal training could not. After the meeting, she returned to her patients. The hospital hallways were quiet now, the chaos of the previous days settling into routine operations. Yet internally, she reflected on the significance of her journey. Her past had unexpectedly resurfaced, and it had brought recognition, but she remained focused on what mattered most, the people she cared for every day. As night approached, she completed her rounds, checking on the final patients. She made sure each person was stable, comfortable, and understood what to expect during recovery. Her attention to detail was meticulous, a habit developed from years of responsibility and experience. Families expressed gratitude, and patients responded with relief, smiles, and small acknowledgments. Exiting the hospital for the night, she felt a quiet sense of accomplishment, but also the weight of responsibility. Her past experiences had shaped her ability to act under pressure, but each day brought new challenges. She understood that heroism was not about recognition. It was about presence, readiness, and the ability to act when needed. She walked slowly through the dark city streets, reflecting on the balance between her private experiences and the public acknowledgement she now faced. Her resolve remained steady, to continue serving, focused and prepared, without seeking fame or attention, understanding that true impact comes from action, not from accolades. The following morning, the hospital felt calm but alive with quiet energy. The 7 patients she had saved were showing steady progress, and their families were less tense, moving to the halls with smiles and soft words of gratitude. It was a relief after the chaos of the previous days. But for her, it was simply another day of work. She moved from room to room, checking vitals, adjusting medications, and speaking softly to patients who were anxious. A child reached for her hand, and she gave a gentle squeeze, reassuring him without words. A mother thanked her again for the care provided to her injured husband. She nodded quietly, not lingering for praise, focusing instead on the next task at hand. Hospital staff continued to watch her closely. Some still whispered about the FBI involvement. Others were in awe of her composure and skill. She remained calm and professional, answering questions about treatments and patient care, without revealing unnecessary details of her past. Her quiet confidence and dedication had earned respect, and even those who had initially doubted her abilities were now openly acknowledging her skills. By mid-morning, hospital administrators gathered to discuss the public attention that had grown around her. Reporters had reached out for interviews, and some social media posts had already gone viral, praising the young nurse who had saved 7 lives in 2 hours. The administrators debated how to handle the situation, considering public statements, awards, and potential recognition ceremonies. She requested to remain anonymous, focusing on the well-being of patients rather than the spotlight. While the administration worked through media inquiries, she continued her rounds. A man recovering from surgery after last week's accident looked up at her with gratitude. "I still can't believe I'm alive," he said softly. "You're stable now," she replied. "That's what matters." Throughout the day, she assisted in procedures, offered guidance to newer staff, and monitored patients with meticulous attention. Her calm presence was steadying for both patients and colleagues alike. The hospital seemed to operate with a quiet rhythm when she was present, and her actions reinforced the confidence of those around her. As the afternoon arrived, she was approached by a family of one of the patients she had saved. They had prepared a small thank you gesture, a handmade card, and a bouquet of flowers. She accepted them with a polite smile, but again, did not dwell on the recognition. She had done what needed to be done, and she was focused on the next responsibility. Later, she found a moment to sit quietly in the staff lounge. The room was filled with whispers of admiration, curiosity, and lingering questions about her past experience overseas and the recent FBI visit. She reflected on the last few days, realizing how much had changed. Her role as a rookie nurse had transformed into that of a recognized, capable professional. But she felt the weight of responsibility more than any sense of fame. Even as the news coverage grew, she remained focused on her patients. Her actions were driven not by recognition or accolades, but by a deep sense of duty. Every detail mattered. The right dosage of medication, the positioning of a patient to aid recovery, a word of reassurance to calm fear and anxiety. By evening, the hospital began to quiet down. Families visited their recovering loved ones, and nurses and doctors wrapped up charts and documentation. She moved through the rooms one last time, ensuring stability and comfort. The children were tucked into beds with blankets, the adults resting peacefully. She offered a final word of reassurance to each patient, a calm presence that was more meaningful than any words of praise. As the night settled, she stepped outside to breathe in the cool air. The city lights shimmered softly, reflecting in the puddles of a light rain. She walked slowly, reflecting on the journey that had led her here. The events of the past week, the accident, the patients saved, the media attention, the involvement of federal agents, had brought a new awareness of her capabilities and past experiences. Yet, she remained grounded, focused on the purpose that had always guided her, to act when needed, to care for those in need, and to remain steady in the face of chaos. She returned to the hospital for the final check-in, ensuring that every patient was stable and comfortable. Nurses began preparing to leave, but she stayed until every routine task was complete. The quiet satisfaction of knowing she had contributed meaningfully to the lives of others was her reward. As she finally stepped out into the night, the hospital behind her was calm, the lights glowing softly. She had faced scrutiny, pressure, and attention, but she had remained true to her work. Recognition could wait, but the lives she had touched would carry the impact of her actions far beyond the hospital walls. Her steps were measured and calm. She understood that being a hero was not about headlines or awards. It was about showing up, focusing, and acting with skill and compassion when people needed her the most. The past and the present had converged to shape the nurse she had become, a quiet, steady presence capable of saving lives and inspiring those around her, not through words or fame, but through consistent, unwavering action. She walked into the night with a sense of calm fulfillment, knowing that her purpose had been realized once again. The stories of gratitude, the quiet respect of her colleagues, and the lives she preserved reminded her that true impact came from dedication, skill, and heart, not from recognition or accolades. And as she disappeared into the city streets, she carried with her the quiet satisfaction of a job well done and the knowledge that she would be ready for whatever challenge came next.